Mistress forces pregnant wife away. 7 years later, she returns for ruthless revenge. Nothing stings like betrayal. Imagine investing your heart, soul, and future into a marriage, only to have it crumble under the weight of a ruthless mistress's schemes. A young wife, pregnant and hopeful, cast aside like an unwanted piece of baggage. Forced to flee her own home with a baby on the way, she disappears into the night, harboring secrets only she can carry. 7 long years pass, and she returns with a vengeance stronger, fiercer, and ready to claim what was once stolen. This is the story of Samantha Miller and the long trail of heartbreak that led to her ruthless revenge. Samantha Miller had always been the kind of person who believed in happily ever afters. Growing up in the cozy suburban town of Parkhaven, she spent her childhood days imagining fairy tale endings, fueled by bedtime stories read lovingly by her mother, the late Linda Townsend. After finishing high school, Samantha won a scholarship to study literature at the prestigious Wellington University, where life would irrevocably change. In her sophomore year, Samantha met Jonathan Miller, a charismatic business major with broad shoulders and a mesmerizing smile. They collided, quite literally, one drizzly afternoon when Samantha, rushing across campus to submit an overdue essay, slipped and tumbled into Jonathan's arms. She laughed it off. He caught his breath. Their chemistry felt as natural as the rhythmic patter of raindrops against the pavements. From that moment on, they were inseparable. Their friends joked they were one of those golden couples, always together, always radiant. They started dating in earnest, and, despite their differences, Samantha's quiet passion for books and Jonathan's outgoing entrepreneurial spirit, their bond only strengthened. Upon graduation, Jonathan joined a thriving startup while Samantha landed a job in publishing. They married a year later in a small, intimate ceremony at the Parkhaven Community Church, inviting only close friends and a few dear relatives. Life seemed blissful, like the perfect snapshot of contentment, but shadows lurked just beyond Samantha's awareness. When Jonathan's startup skyrocketed, so did his ambitions. He worked tirelessly, often late into the night, forging partnerships and meeting prospective investors. Samantha supported him every step of the way, her heart swelling with pride for the man she adored. Though often exhausted from her own work at a bustling publishing house, she would always wait up, greeting him with a warm meal and a gentle smile. She believed that shared sacrifice would ultimately pay off if they only persevered together. It was during this intense period of expansion that Jonathan started working closely with Veronica Hayes, a dazzling marketing consultant rumored to be the best in the field. Veronica was known for her fierce intelligence and unwavering confidence. She had made headlines in the business world for turning struggling companies into overnight success stories. In every sense, she was the kind of woman who made an entrance lithe, with impeccably styled hair and a designer wardrobe that demanded attention. At first, Samantha admired Veronica from afar, hearing about her prowess in marketing. Jonathan spoke of her with professional respect, praising her ability to open doors for their company. Veronica's name arose in casual dinner conversations. Samantha would crack a joke about how determined Jonathan sounded, and he'd laugh. After all, Samantha had never been the jealous type. She trusted her husband, but with success came lifestyle changes. Big contracts meant client dinners in upscale restaurants, corporate galas, and weekend retreats. Samantha found herself alone more often at their rented townhouse, leafing through manuscripts and dreaming of starting a family. When she discovered she was pregnant, she was overjoyed. Finally, she and Jonathan would fulfill the promise of building a life that included not just success, but also the warm laughter of a child running around. Yet, beneath the glitter of corporate achievements, something cold and deceitful was taking root. Late nights at work turned into unexplained business trips. Phone calls ended abruptly when Samantha entered the room. Polite indifference replaced affectionate gestures. The signs were there, but Samantha, ever trusting, chalked them up to stress or fatigue. Everything came crashing down one fateful evening when Samantha prepared an elaborate dinner to surprise Jonathan with the pregnancy news. She had decorated the dining area with soft lights and aromatic candles. She set out 2 tiny baby socks, a subtle hint of the miracle growing within her. Her heart pounded with excitement, visualizing Jonathan's teary-eyed reaction and the tender embrace that would follow. But Jonathan never arrived. Hours passed. The meal went cold. Samantha's calls went straight to voicemail. She sat alone, her excitement morphing into a heavy dread. Around midnight, she crawled into bed, tears staining her pillow. Something told her life would never be the same again. The next morning, Samantha woke to the sound of keys jangling at the front door. She rushed out, relief momentarily dissolving her anger. Jonathan entered, hair disheveled, shirt untucked, the smell of alcohol mingling with a scent that was unquestionably feminine. Before Samantha could speak, he mumbled some incoherent excuse and stumbled toward the bedroom. Despite her heartbreak, Samantha helped him undress and settle into bed, her fury simmering beneath a devotion she still felt bound to. Over the next few days, Jonathan avoided Samantha's gaze. When she finally cornered him, tears in her eyes, to confront him about his absences and the pregnancy, all he did was nod with a vacant stare. He murmured a half-hearted congratulations before insisting his life was too chaotic to celebrate properly. "We'll talk when things calm down," he muttered, leaving Samantha clutching her still flat belly, an icy fear settling in her heart. That was the moment Samantha realized she was losing him. And it was also the moment she knew another woman had stepped into the picture, uninvited, but determined to stay. The days following Samantha's painful realization felt like a slow-motion car crash. She watched her marriage unravel in the most trivial interactions. Jonathan grew distant. He stopped inquiring about her day and seemed disinterested in the pregnancy. The once lively spark in his eyes had dimmed whenever he looked at her, now overshadowed by something more unsettling, guilt, perhaps, or even irritation that she was trying to hold him to the vows they had once cherished. One afternoon, Samantha mustered the courage to visit Jonathan's workplace, hoping to reconnect on neutral ground. The moment she walked into the sleek, glass-paneled lobby, she felt out of place, just another face in the throng of visitors. She clutched a homemade lunch she'd prepared for him, half worried he would be embarrassed by the gesture. But love does foolish things, and her hope outweighed her anxiety. When she reached his office floor, she spotted Veronica Hayes speaking intently to a group of young executives. Even among the polished crowd, Veronica stood out in a fitted suit that accentuated her figure. Her voice was commanding, confidence practically dripping from every syllable. Samantha waited until the meeting ended before approaching. "Hello, Miss Hayes. I'm Samantha, Jonathan's wife." She forced a friendly smile. Veronica did not miss a beat. Her eyes flicked over Samantha with guarded curiosity, and she offered a professionally polite handshake. "Jonathan's wife." "Of course I've heard a lot about you," Veronica said, her voice smooth as silk. There it was, a slight condescension, as though Samantha were a relic from Jonathan's past. Trying her best to remain polite, Samantha explained she had come by with lunch. Veronica nodded coolly, directing Samantha to the conference room, where Jonathan was immersed in a conversation with a few team members. But the look on Jonathan's face when he saw Samantha was not one of gratitude. Instead, it was a flicker of annoyance, overshadowed by an obvious discomfort he tried unsuccessfully to hide. He hurriedly ended the conversation and ushered Samantha aside. "What are you doing here?" he hissed under his breath, glancing over his shoulder to ensure his colleagues weren't watching. I brought you lunch," Samantha stammered, hurt welling in her eyes. "I just wanted to see you." We haven't really talked since we found out I'm pregnant. She kept her voice as gentle as possible. Jonathan sighed, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Thank you. That's sweet. But I'm swamped with work right now. Can I call you later? The rejection stung, but Samantha nodded and handed him the lunchbox. She left, feeling more like a nuisance than a cherished partner. Days turned into weeks. Samantha finally confided in her best friend, Monica Garcia. Monica was a single mother who had once navigated a chaotic relationship, and her fierce loyalty to Samantha never wavered. Over coffee at a local cafe, Samantha poured out her suspicions. Monica listened intently, her hands clenching her latte cup in growing anger. If he's cheating, you need to confront him head-on, Monica advised. Living in the dark is killing you. I know, Samantha replied softly. I've tried, but Jonathan keeps shutting me out. That night, Samantha decided enough was enough. She rummaged through a drawer in their living room, searching for old phone bills or any scraps of evidence. Her heart pounded as she discovered an unopened letter from a luxury resort addressed to Jonathan, reservation details for 2 guests, set for a weekend trip that had already passed. Samantha recognized the dates. That was the same weekend Jonathan claimed he was in Chicago for an important work conference. Every nerve in Samantha's body screamed the truth. Jonathan had taken Veronica on a secret getaway, leaving her alone in their home, their unborn child forgotten. Devastated, Samantha confronted him as soon as he walked in the door. "You lied to me," she said through gritted teeth, brandishing the reservation letter. Jonathan glanced at it, then slammed it down on the coffee table. "This isn't what you think," he muttered, avoiding her gaze. Samantha felt tears burning her eyes. "Then tell me it's not a romantic trip with her." Something in Jonathan snapped. "You want to know the truth? Fine. Veronica and I, yes, we've been seeing each other, but it's complicated. She's helping me with the company, and this arrangement, it just happened. The betrayal was more than Samantha could bear." She clutched her stomach, trembling. He was telling her he loved someone else while she carried his child. She felt rage flaring beneath her sorrow. "What about us? Our family?" she asked, in a voice cracked with pain. "I'm pregnant, Jonathan." At that moment, a key turned in the front door. To Samantha's horror, Veronica stepped inside as if she owned the place. Her gaze landed on Samantha, then lingered on Jonathan. It was a brazen move, one that hammered the final nail into Samantha's faith in her marriage. "You told me you lived alone," Veronica said dismissively, folding her arms. She didn't even bother to feign remorse. In her eyes, Samantha was merely a pesky obstacle. Jonathan winced at Veronica's callousness, but said nothing to defend his wife. Samantha felt reality blur. How dare Veronica waltz into her home unannounced at a time like this? Blood pounded in Samantha's ears. "Get out," she whispered, voice trembling. When neither of them moved, Samantha screamed it this time. "Get out!" Veronica's lips curved into a mocking smile. She arched an eyebrow at Jonathan as if to say, "Well, what now?" Jonathan opened his mouth, but before any words could form, Samantha shoved past them both, tears streaming as she fled to the bedroom. She locked the door and sank to the floor, sobs racking her body. Outside, the muffled tones of urgent whispers and footsteps signaled that both Jonathan and Veronica left together. Their exit was an admission of guilt, a betrayal so deep Samantha believed she might never recover. That night, Samantha lay in bed, hand on her stomach, silent tears marking her pillow. She whispered to the tiny life growing within her, apologizing for the chaos and heartache already surrounding them. In the darkest night of her soul, she vowed she would protect this child at any cost, even if it meant walking away forever. For the next few days, Samantha received nothing from Jonathan, no phone calls, no texts, no effort at reconciliation. The loudest thing in their house was the suffocating silence. Unable to endure it any longer, Samantha decided to confront him at work one last time. Perhaps away from Veronica's presence, they could speak calmly about the future, for the sake of their unborn child. When she arrived, the receptionist informed her that Jonathan was in a client meeting. Samantha waited in the lobby, flipping through business magazines without absorbing a single word. After an hour, she spied Jonathan stepping out of a glass-walled conference room, accompanied by Veronica. Their body language spoke volumes, a casual brush of hands, the ease in their laughter. It twisted Samantha's insides. Gathering her courage, she intercepted Jonathan near the elevators. Veronica hovered close, clearly unwilling to step aside. The tension was palpable. Jonathan, caught between the two women, looked around nervously. Worried co-workers might overhear. "I need to talk to you alone," Samantha demanded, keeping her voice low. "We have a meeting," Veronica cut in, glaring at Samantha. "A meeting you can handle yourself," Samantha shot back, her fury forging a boldness she didn't know she possessed. Veronica gave an exasperated sigh and stalked off, shooting Jonathan a warning glare. Jonathan rubbed his forehead, as though this were all a terrible inconvenience. Samantha led him to a quiet corridor near the stairwell. "Are we seriously going to pretend our marriage isn't crumbling?" Samantha asked, her voice trembling with pent-up emotion. Jonathan looked away. "It's not that simple, Sam. Veronica's connected, and she's done so much for my career. He hesitated, grappling with words that would make sense of the senseless. "It's complicated." Samantha felt as though she was speaking to a stranger. "You have a wife carrying your child. What's so complicated about loyalty to your family?" Jonathan's jaw tightened. "You don't understand. Veronica's wealthy. She's offered me a partnership in a new venture. We can expand beyond anything I ever imagined. This is a huge opportunity." Samantha stared at him in disbelief. "So, she's financing your ambitions, and you think that's worth throwing away your marriage?" He exhaled heavily, torn. "I never meant for you to get hurt. But Veronica, she's convinced me we can have a better life, better connections, more resources. Maybe you and I rushed into this pregnancy. I'm just not prepared." With those words, Samantha realized he was no longer the man she fell in love with. The glow in his eyes, once so purely adoring, had shifted to a ruthless hunger for success. She wanted to scream at him, to beg him to see reason, but her pride stood firm. "Then you should know," she said softly. "This child is real. I'm real. And if you can't stand by me, I'll find a way to stand on my own." Before Jonathan could respond, Veronica appeared, her stiletto heels clicking ominously against the tiled floor. She placed a possessive hand on Jonathan's shoulder, challenging Samantha's presence with a smirk. "We have an investor waiting," she said to Jonathan, ignoring Samantha entirely. Something snapped inside Samantha. All the heartbreak, humiliation, and betrayal surged to the surface. "You can have him," she spat at Veronica, her voice resonating in the echoing corridor. "But I promise you, you'll regret crossing me." She turned to Jonathan, tears shimmering. "And you'll regret losing what we had." The next day, Samantha began packing her belongings. She couldn't live in that townhouse any longer, haunted by memories of happier days and the echo of Veronica's heels. She placed cherished photos and clothes into boxes, each item reminding her how quickly life could unravel. As she was about to leave, she heard the front door open. Jonathan stood there, a blank expression on his face. Veronica was beside him, looking around with a disdainful curl of her lip. "What's going on?" Jonathan asked, eyeing the boxes. Samantha inhaled sharply, trying to steady her voice. "I can't do this anymore. I'm leaving." Veronica moved past Jonathan with an air of entitlement. "Let's make this simpler," she said, pulling out an envelope from her designer purse. "Here's money for you to leave quietly. We both know Jonathan won't be supporting you. Take it and go." Samantha's hand shook as she glanced at the envelope. She felt sick to her core. Is this what you think of me? A desperate woman who'll be bought off? Veronica shrugged. Take it or don't. I don't care. As long as you're out of our lives. Jonathan didn't speak. That was the final blow. His silence was complicity, an affirmation that he was siding with Veronica. A million thoughts bombarded Samantha's mind, but the safety of her unborn child prevailed. She grabbed her suitcase and, with trembling dignity, walked out. She heard Veronica's voice whisper behind her as she left. Now we can finally move forward. Samantha's heart ached as she crossed the threshold, tears obscuring her vision. She had been cast aside, pregnant and alone, by the man who once promised to protect her. On that desolate walkway outside their once shared home, Samantha swore to herself and her baby that she would survive. She would go far away from their poisonous grasp. And maybe one day she would return stronger than ever, unrecognizable to those who had broken her soul. Leaving Parkhaven became Samantha's only choice. She had no savings, no steady income, and her blossoming pregnancy limited her job opportunities. Monica Garcia, her best friend, rallied what resources she could. She loaned Samantha enough money for a bus ticket and connected her with a distant cousin, Angela Rodriguez, who lived in a small coastal town called Crestwood Bay. Angela was a kind-hearted woman with a modest home, and she agreed to let Samantha stay until she got on her feet. Samantha arrived in Crestwood Bay with a single suitcase and a heart full of sorrow. The quaint seaside town contrasted sharply with the painful memories she left behind. The rhythmic crash of waves against the rocky shore became both her lullaby and her daily reminder of resilience. She found a humble job as a cashier at a local grocery store where the manager, Miss Lydia Garner, took pity on her situation. Though it didn't pay much, it was a start. During her pregnancy, Samantha battled waves of loneliness. She had no partner to rub her feet or share her excitement over a first sonogram, but every night she would place her hands over her growing belly, whispering words of love to the baby. Those whispers became her anchor, her reason to keep pushing forward. Within 4 months, Samantha saved enough to rent a small studio apartment near the water, gratefully thanking Angela before moving out to give her host some space. Shortly after settling into her new home, Samantha became ill from complications related to stress and inadequate prenatal care. She ended up in the local clinic, where Dr. Howard Rosenberg, an empathetic physician nearing retirement, treated her. In hushed tones, he lectured her about the importance of rest, nutrition, and prenatal vitamins. Samantha was grateful for his kindness and promised to do better. Knowing how tight her budget was, Dr. Rosenberg waived some fees and even arranged a small baby shower in the clinic's common room, involving the nurses and a few local volunteers. It was the first time Samantha felt genuine warmth and community since her world had collapsed. When her daughter, Mia Linda Miller, was born, Samantha experienced a surge of love that banished any lingering doubts about her decision to leave Parkhaven. Mia was a fragile little girl with Jonathan's green eyes, but Samantha's soft features. Night after night, Samantha would watch Mia sleep, heart clenching with conflicting emotions, gratitude that her child existed, and bitterness that Jonathan, her father, had chosen to abandon them. In the following years, Samantha toiled relentlessly. She found a second job typing transcripts for a local law firm, working late into the night after her shift at the grocery store. Monica sent small financial gifts when she could, and Angela babysat Mia on weekends, providing Samantha with much-needed breaks. Samantha also devoured every self-help book she could find, determined to transform her pain into power. Her resilience paid off. As Mia turned 5, Samantha's knack for spotting compelling narratives from her background in publishing caught the attention of a local writer, Caroline Hughes. Caroline was an older novelist who needed help editing her latest manuscript. Impressed by Samantha's keen eye and discipline, Caroline recommended her to other authors in the region. Word spread, and soon Samantha was able to quit her grocery store job and work as a freelance editor, something that suited both her passions and her parental schedule. Simultaneously, Samantha discovered a fierce drive for self-improvement. She signed up for online courses in business and marketing, ironically reminiscent of Jonathan's world. She would wake up before dawn, brew herself a pot of coffee, and study case studies on digital marketing, brand strategy, and business expansion. On weekends, she attended workshops in the city, leaving Mia with Angela. Each certificate she earned, she tucked away like a medal of triumph. But revenge was never far from her mind. Samantha would stand on the balcony of her small apartment at night, gazing at the moonlit water, remembering Jonathan and Veronica, remembering how easily they tossed her aside. She fantasized about marching back into their lives one day, unrecognizable and unstoppable. When those thoughts became too dark, Samantha focused on Mia, reminding herself she couldn't let bitterness overshadow the life she was building for her daughter. Then, on Mia's 7th birthday, an unexpected call arrived. Monica phoned with urgent news from Parkhaven. Through the grapevine, she'd learned that Jonathan's business had become wildly successful for a time. He and Veronica expanded, traveling internationally, wooing wealthy investors. They led a glamorous life, posing for high-end magazines, hosting lavish fundraisers. But apparently, cracks were forming in their empire. Monica mentioned rumors of embezzlement, betrayal, and legal trouble. It seemed Veronica's unscrupulous tactics had begun to backfire. That phone call ignited a spark in Samantha. She recalled the venom in Veronica's gaze as she offered hush money to make Samantha vanish. She remembered Jonathan's complacency, his coldness at the most vulnerable moment in her life. A swirl of emotions rushed through her: anger, hatred, pity. For 7 years she had stayed away, forging a new life to protect her heart and her child. But now, the possibility of re-entering Jonathan's orbit, more powerful than they could ever expect, was too tantalizing to ignore. In the months that followed, Samantha carefully orchestrated a plan. Her marketing skills were no longer amateur level. She had developed a sharp, insightful mind. She began making strategic connections in the corporate world through her editing clients. She networked, pitched ideas, and soon found herself consulting for small businesses that valued her blend of creativity and discipline. Money trickled in more consistently. She upgraded her and Mia's living conditions, moving into a modest but comfortable 2-bedroom condominium. Every step was a piece of the puzzle she was assembling for her eventual return to Parkhaven. Samantha didn't want to show up empty-handed, looking like the scorned wife who had run away. She wanted to arrive with influence, leverage, and unstoppable confidence. When that day came, she told herself, she would not be the same meek woman who cried in the hallway of Jonathan's office. Parkhaven greeted Samantha with a bittersweet familiarity when she finally decided to visit. Mia, now 7, clutched her mother's hand in excitement. Having grown up by the coast, Mia was thrilled to see a new place, especially one with a storied role in her mother's past. Samantha had prepared her daughter for this trip, explaining in gentle terms that they were returning to where Samantha had grown up, and that they might meet people from an earlier chapter of their lives. Monica Garcia met them at the bus terminal. The two women fell into each other's arms, tears mingling with relieved laughter. Monica knelt to greet Mia, beaming at the little girl who was a mirror of Samantha's resilience. Before heading to Monica's apartment, they made a quick stop at the local diner, the same place Samantha and Monica used to frequent in their school days. Over a plate of fries and a milkshake, Monica filled Samantha in on Parkhaven's latest gossip. She mentioned that Jonathan and Veronica lived in a sprawling estate on the outskirts of town, close to the business district. Their company, Elevate Edge, had undergone several expansions and rebrandings, but rumors pointed to internal strife. Word had it that Veronica had attracted the attention of powerful but morally ambiguous investors, resulting in backroom deals. Jonathan, once naive to the scale of Veronica's machinations, was believed to be complicit in some questionable financial maneuvers. Samantha listened quietly, sipping her coffee, mind churning with plans. She told Monica about her newfound success in marketing and editing, downplaying the depth of her achievements. But Monica wasn't fooled. She saw the refined posture, the self-assured glint in Samantha's eyes. She recognized the carefully curated designer handbag Samantha carried, a silent testament to her improved financial standing. "So what's your move?" Monica asked, voice low with concern. "If you plan to confront them, you need to be prepared. Veronica is still vicious." Samantha offered a small, enigmatic smile. "I'll reveal myself in my own time. First, I need to see if the rumors are true." To keep a low profile, Samantha rented a small house on the other side of town for the duration of her stay. Mia was delighted by the tree-lined streets and the friendly neighbors. Meanwhile, Samantha spent her days meeting local business owners under the guise of building her consulting portfolio. Through these encounters, she gleaned valuable insights about Elevate Edge. She discovered that a major scandal was brewing, something involving falsified accounts and misallocated funds. One afternoon, Samantha left Mia with Monica and visited the corporate plaza where Jonathan's company was headquartered. It was the same building where she had once confronted him and Veronica. She straightened her blazer, took a deep breath, and stepped inside. The bustling lobby felt surreal, stirring old memories. As she approached the reception desk, she noticed an employee pass with the Elevate Edge logo sticking out of a trash bin. Acting on impulse, she picked it up. The name read, Robert Kincaid, Financial Auditor. Strange that such an ID would be discarded so casually. At the reception desk, Samantha inquired about scheduling a meeting with a marketing director or executive. She adopted a professional tone, using her established identity as a freelance consultant. The receptionist, preoccupied, handed her a generic business card and suggested she send an email. Samantha was about to leave when she felt a tap on her shoulder. "I think you dropped this," a man said, handing her a small pen she hadn't even realized she'd dropped. He wore a visitor's badge, not an employee ID. His name was David Kemp. "Thank you," Samantha replied, smiling politely. She noticed the folder under his arm bore the label Elevate Edge Legal Documents. Intrigue flared in her mind. David was clearly not just another visitor. Samantha decided to take a chance. "Do you work here?" David shook his head. "I'm a legal consultant, brought in for a special case." "Very hush, hush." Samantha's ears perked. "Sounds important." He glanced around before leaning in. "Between you and me, this company's in deep waters. There's an internal conflict, something about the CFO falsifying financial records under the CEO's directive. I shouldn't be talking about it, but it's messy." Their conversation was cut short by a phone call David had to take, but before he stepped away, he offered Samantha his business card. "In case you want to talk marketing for my firm, we might need someone soon." Samantha thanked him, heart pounding with possibilities. She realized this was the break she needed, a direct link to the swirling scandal within Jonathan's company. That evening, she confided her discoveries to Monica. "The timing is perfect," she said. "There's trouble brewing, and maybe it's time I step into the ring. If Jonathan is complicit, I want him to face consequences. If Veronica is behind it all, then this could be the opening I need." Monica laid a hand on Samantha's shoulder. "Just be sure you're doing this for the right reasons. You've built a life for yourself and Mia. You don't need to wade into their mess." "I know," Samantha said softly, "but they destroyed my trust, exiled me when I was pregnant, and made me feel worthless. Part of me needs closure. I won't rest until I confront them, not just as a victim, but as someone who can hold them accountable. Determined, Samantha scheduled a formal meeting with David Kemp under the pretext of discussing marketing strategies for his firm. During their conversation, she skillfully extracted more details about the internal investigations at Elevate Edge. He confirmed that the CFO, a timid man named Carl Edwards, had been coerced into fraudulent bookkeeping by the top brass, one of whom was rumored to be Veronica Hayes. Jonathan Miller is the official CEO, but Veronica Hayes holds immense sway, David confided. Rumor has it, she's the real power behind the curtain. Samantha listened, feeling an odd mixture of satisfaction and rage. Jonathan, once such a bright dreamer, had become a puppet for Veronica's schemes. And now, cracks in their empire threatened to topple them both. The stage was set. Samantha would make her presence known at Elevate Edge, but under circumstances that gave her the upper hand. She wanted them to see the woman they had cast aside was not only alive and well, but poised to help expose their wrongdoing or negotiate her own brand of justice. Under the guise of negotiating a consulting contract, Samantha arranged an official appointment with Elevate Edge's new marketing director, Miss Barbara Lynn, who was unaware of Samantha's history with the company. The strategy was simple. Samantha would present herself as a well-regarded marketing consultant, pitch potential campaigns to revitalize the company's tarnished image, and maneuver into a position where she could meet Jonathan or Veronica directly. On the scheduled day, Samantha arrived at the sleek office complex, wearing a tailored suit that exuded quiet confidence. She left Mia in the care of Monica, reminding herself that her daughter was the true reason she needed to see this mission through. Despite her nerves, Samantha strode through the lobby with purposeful steps. She checked in at the reception, then proceeded to the modern glass-walled boardroom on the 14th floor. Miss Lynn welcomed her politely, though with a trace of corporate detachment. As Samantha delivered her presentation covering brand rehabilitation, strategic outreach, and investor confidence, she noticed Miss Lynn's approving nods. But halfway through, the door to the boardroom opened. Veronica Hayes swept in, her imposing aura filling the space. Samantha's pulse raced, but her face remained calm, like a mask. Veronica barely spared Samantha a glance at first, shifting her focus to Miss Lynn. "Sorry to interrupt, Barbara. I thought this meeting was with a prospective consultant I specifically recommended," Veronica said, arching a brow. Miss Lynn blinked, clearly unsettled. "This is Samantha Miller, a highly recommended marketing consultant. Your office received an inquiry and set up this appointment." Veronica's gaze finally settled on Samantha and froze. A flicker of recognition flashed across her sharp features. Her eyes widened, then narrowed in suspicion. The reaction was subtle, but Samantha detected it instantly. Veronica quickly recovered her composure, curling her lips into a polite smile. "I wasn't aware we had scheduled a meeting with Samantha Miller," she said, smoothly feigning ignorance. Samantha held her ground, greeting Veronica with professional courtesy. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Miss Hayes," she said, voice steady. Inside, she felt adrenaline coursing through her veins. Miss Lynn, sensing tension she couldn't identify, encouraged them both to continue. Samantha wrapped up her pitch, showing data on how rebranding efforts could mitigate negative press, particularly any looming scandal. Veronica listened in silence, occasionally interjecting with pointed questions that Samantha skillfully batted aside. Miss Lynn seemed impressed, but the atmosphere bristled with unspoken conflict. When Samantha concluded, Miss Lynn glanced at Veronica, seeking her reaction. Veronica offered a tight smile. "You've clearly done your research, Miss Miller. I'm interested in hearing more. Why don't we reconvene tomorrow for further discussions? Barbara, please arrange it." Without waiting for an answer, Veronica pivoted and left the room, leaving Miss Lynn and Samantha momentarily stunned. After stepping out of the boardroom, Samantha's heart pounded so loudly she thought it might echo down the corridors. She headed toward the elevator, only to be intercepted by a young assistant who breathlessly explained that Miss Hayes wanted a private word in her office. Samantha hesitated, but then followed. Veronica's office was a corner space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Opulent furniture and modern art suggested a woman who prized power and aesthetics. Veronica stood by the window, arms folded, her posture rigid. She waited until the door closed behind Samantha before turning around. "What do you think you're doing here?" Veronica demanded, eyes flashing. Samantha met her glare head-on. "I'm here as a marketing consultant, as you heard." Veronica let out a derisive laugh. "Don't play games. We both know exactly who you are and who you used to be. You have some nerve, showing your face after all this time." Samantha stepped closer, her voice controlled. "I was invited. Elevate Edge needs help, and I provide that service. Seems straightforward." Veronica's lips tightened. "Cut the pretense. Are you here to blackmail us? Demand hush money again? Because if you think you can waltz in and profit from some sob story about the poor pregnant wife cast aside, think again." Samantha's knuckles clenched, but she forced herself to breathe. "If I wanted hush money, I would have come sooner. 7 years, Veronica. 7 years. I'm here because I've established my own reputation, and your company needs crisis management. Unless, of course, you're admitting there's a crisis to manage," Veronica scoffed, but Samantha caught a flicker of uncertainty. "Jonathan told me you left of your own accord, that you wanted nothing to do with him or the company." Samantha felt a white-hot flare of anger. "That's the narrative he's telling. I seem to recall being offered an envelope of cash to disappear, and you two made it very clear that my presence wasn't welcome. So I built a life on my own terms." Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken history. Finally, Veronica leaned back against her desk, crossing her arms. "What do you want?" she asked, voice quieter now. "I want to propose my services to Elevate Edge legitimately," Samantha replied. "I know the rumors, the potential legal battles ahead. You need a brand overhaul and an airtight PR strategy. That's what I excel at." Veronica studied Samantha, her eyes steely. "We're not running a charity here. I'll have to talk to Jonathan." "By all means," Samantha said, forcing a poised smile. "Set up a meeting. I'd love to reconnect." Veronica pressed her lips together. "I'll be in touch." With that, Samantha exited the office, leaving Veronica in stunned silence. She walked down the corridor, each step fueling the simmering sense of triumph inside her. This was just the beginning. She would see Jonathan face to face, witness his reaction, and she would reveal the unstoppable force she had become. The next day, Samantha returned to Elevate Edge for a follow-up meeting, as requested by Veronica. She spotted a slight commotion near the reception area. Jonathan Miller, flanked by 2 junior executives, was scanning through documents with a tense look. Samantha paused, taking in the sight of the man she had once loved so deeply and who had ultimately shattered her heart. He still had the same green eyes, the same confident posture that had once enchanted her. But now there were faint lines of stress etched across his forehead, and the charismatic spark seemed dimmed. Suddenly, Jonathan glanced up and locked eyes with Samantha. The color drained from his face. For a moment, it was as if time stood still. Samantha strode forward, feigning an air of polite curiosity. "Jonathan," she greeted with a nod, as if they were merely acquaintances. He swallowed hard, dismissing his subordinates with a wave. The executives hurried off, whispering among themselves. "Samantha?" he managed, voice trembling with shock. "Is that really you?" "Yes," she replied coolly. "I'm here to consult for your company. Veronica should have informed you." He blinked, fumbling for words. She said a consultant was coming, but not who. My God, he inhaled, steadying himself. Can we speak in private? Samantha agreed, following him to a smaller meeting room. The door closed, sealing them away from prying eyes. For a moment, neither spoke. Jonathan seemed to be searching her face for traces of the woman he once knew. Samantha, however, stood composed, arms folded. You look different, he said finally, struggling to find the right tone. I've had 7 years to grow up, Samantha responded, voice tinged with irony. I assume you have too? He raked a hand through his hair, clearly rattled. Samantha, I'm sorry about everything that happened. I never wanted it to end like that. She held up a hand. Spare me. I'm not here to discuss the past in emotional terms. The fact is, you need a consultant, and I happen to be very good at what I do. Jonathan studied her, sensing the steel in her demeanor. So you're really here for business? Unless you feel threatened by that idea, Samantha challenged. He shook his head. No, not threatened, just surprised. He glanced away. Veronica told me you left willingly. I never imagined you'd come back, much less like this, with a career and a plan. Samantha's heart twisted at his mention of willingly. She recalled the humiliating offer of hush money, Veronica's dismissive arrogance, and Jonathan's silent acquiescence. I didn't have many choices back then, she said softly. But let's not dwell on it. I'd prefer to focus on your company's problems, unless you're too proud to accept help from your ex-wife. Jonathan looked pained. I want to hear your proposal. We've had some difficulties with PR. Veronica's approach is too aggressive, and we've lost investor confidence. We might be facing litigation. Samantha's eyes flickered. I've heard. I can guide you through a damage control strategy, brand rehabilitation, and forging new alliances with reputable partners. But I have conditions. He gave a wary nod. Name them. First, my contract is on my terms, my fees, my schedule. Second, I'll have access to all relevant files, financials, correspondences, everything. If I'm to fix your image, I need complete transparency. He swallowed, hesitating. We're in the middle of an internal audit. Certain documents are sensitive. Samantha's expression hardened. No secrets, Jonathan. That's my requirement. A tense silence followed, and then he reluctantly nodded. Okay, I'll need to talk to Veronica, but I can push it through. Anything else? Yes, Samantha said, voice laced with an unspoken challenge. When this is all done, I want a public acknowledgement of my role, full credit for turning things around, an official press statement from you. Jonathan blinked, as though surprised by her assertiveness. All right, he agreed quietly. I'll do it. They parted ways soon after, with Jonathan promising to finalize the contract by the end of the week. Veronica, predictably, was less than enthusiastic. In a hushed confrontation, after Samantha left the building, Veronica cornered Jonathan in his office. What are you thinking? Veronica hissed, voice sharp. She's your ex-wife, for God's sake. She could destroy us from the inside. Jonathan stood by his desk, shoulders tense. She could also save us. We can't keep covering up the company's issues, Veronica. It's too big to handle alone. If Samantha can navigate the public sphere, maybe we stand a chance. Veronica clenched her fists. You're letting sentimentality cloud your judgment. He shot her a weary glare. Don't accuse me of sentimentality. We wouldn't be in this mess if we hadn't played fast and loose with the numbers. Veronica's face hardened. I did what was necessary for growth. Don't forget that everything we have is because of my connections, my drive. What we have, Jonathan echoed bitterly, is a ticking time bomb. If we let Samantha help, maybe we can defuse it. Veronica stormed out, seething with anger. She couldn't believe the nerve of this woman returning after years, prancing in like a savior. But she also couldn't deny that Samantha possessed skills that might mitigate the looming crisis. With lawsuits on the horizon, the board was desperate for a solution that went beyond Veronica's usual tactics of bullying and bribery. Outside the shimmering corporate tower, Samantha exhaled a shaky breath. She had stood face to face with Jonathan, the father of her child, and managed to keep her composure. She had locked eyes with Veronica and survived that venomous stare. This was the first major step in her plan for justice, though part of her questioned if she was unleashing Pandora's box by stepping into their chaotic world again. Returning to Monica's apartment, Samantha scooped Mia into a warm hug. The sweet innocence on her daughter's face soothed the tension in her muscles. Monica gave Samantha a questioning look, and Samantha nodded in quiet triumph. "It's happening," she whispered. "I'm in." Monica smiled, though concern lingered in her eyes. "Just be careful," she warned. "Revenge can be a dangerous game." Samantha closed her eyes briefly, remembering Veronica's smirk, Jonathan's stunned stare, and the humiliations that had driven her away. "I know, but I won't let them hurt me or Mia ever again." The ink on Samantha's consulting contract with Elevate Edge had barely dried when she began her deep dive into the company's records. Jonathan granted her the access she demanded, though Veronica tried to place restrictions. Through late-night sessions, Samantha pored over financial statements, marketing budgets, and private memos. It didn't take long to find glaring discrepancies, numbers that simply didn't add up. Invoices for non-existent services, inflated expenses, and a complicated web of shell accounts all pointed to one conclusion: massive fraud. Occasionally, Samantha would catch Jonathan observing her, a conflicted expression on his face. She refused to let his presence distract her. The memory of being thrown out, pregnant and alone, was enough to fortify her focus. Meanwhile, Veronica kept her distance, perhaps sensing that Samantha was a storm about to break. When they did cross paths, tension crackled in the air. Veronica's glare was always calculating, a silent promise that she was ready to strike if Samantha made a wrong move. As Samantha formulated a crisis management plan, she discovered she was holding the very evidence that could topple Jonathan and Veronica. She had a choice: use it to force them to accept her proposals and publicly acknowledge her triumph, or expose them entirely, causing their downfall. Part of her burned with the desire to ruin them the way they had ruined her life, humiliating her at her most vulnerable moment. But she also weighed the cost. If the company collapsed, many innocent employees would suffer. Moreover, Jonathan was still Mia's father, even if he'd never acted like it. Strategy took shape in Samantha's mind. She would orchestrate a controlled reveal, ensuring that the blame fell squarely on Veronica's manipulation where most of it belonged, and that Jonathan, if he cooperated, could salvage enough to rebuild legitimately. She wanted them both to understand the magnitude of her power and to finally recognize her worth. The first step was a press conference. Under Samantha's guidance, Elevate Edge announced a transparent internal review of its financial practices. Jonathan stood at the podium, reading from a statement Samantha had crafted, promising accountability and an improved corporate culture. Samantha watched from the sidelines, arms folded, as cameras flashed. Despite her personal feelings, she had done her job well. Veronica paced backstage, shooting daggers at Samantha. "This is going to expose us," she hissed. "Why the hell are we admitting wrongdoing?" Samantha calmly replied, "We're not admitting guilt. We're acknowledging irregularities and committing to transparency. Investors respect honesty, at least, more than lies." Veronica's expression was livid, but she had no choice except to follow the plan. The alternative was open scandal and swift legal action. Once again, Samantha realized how thoroughly she had turned the tables. Veronica's survival depended on Samantha's expertise, the very woman she had once paid to disappear. While the public responded cautiously, share prices stabilized instead of plummeting. Stakeholders seemed willing to give the newly transparent Elevate Edge a chance. Many applauded the leadership for taking a proactive stance, but behind closed doors, Samantha laid out the harsh reality to Jonathan and Veronica. "This is just the beginning," she told them. "We'll need to cooperate fully with the audit. We'll restructure your financials, and we'll have to let certain board members go, those involved in shady deals." Jonathan nodded, looking grim. "I understand." Veronica glowered, arms crossed. "You're basically telling us we need to disband half our leadership. Do you have any idea what that will cost us?" Samantha met her glare. "Less than the cost of a prison sentence." The words hung in the air. Veronica's bravado faltered for a split second, revealing fear behind those cold eyes. Jonathan, pale and tense, looked like a man caught in a tidal wave. Over the following weeks, Samantha facilitated a meticulous purge. Emails, bank statements, and questionable contracts were surrendered to the auditors. The CFO, Carl Edwards, resigned, citing personal reasons. Several board members quietly stepped down. All the while, Samantha ensured journalists, investors, and regulators were kept in the loop, spinning every development as part of a heroic cleanup effort. In press releases, Jonathan credited a renowned marketing consultant, Miss Samantha Miller, for spearheading the company's integrity overhaul. Each mention of Samantha Miller in the press was another barb in Veronica's pride. More importantly, it was a vindication for Samantha herself, a public acknowledgement of the value she brought to a company once used as a weapon against her. Finally, as the dust began to settle, Samantha decided it was time for the last phase of her plan, a direct confrontation about the past. Late one evening, she summoned Jonathan and Veronica to a private meeting at the office, ensuring no interruptions. They gathered around a conference table, tension crackling in the fluorescent light. Samantha placed a thick folder on the table. "You can guess what's in here," she said quietly. Evidence tying the fraudulent accounts to Veronica's private dealings. And not just financial records. Emails, messages, recorded memos. Veronica paled, but tried to remain composed. "Are you threatening me?" Samantha ignored her question, turning to Jonathan. "Did you know about these backroom deals from the start?" Jonathan shook his head, voice thick with regret. "Not at first. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too deep. Veronica convinced me it was the only way to maintain our growth." Samantha's eyes flickered with a mixture of pity and anger. "So you sacrificed your principles for success?" Veronica slammed her palm on the table. "Don't you dare judge us, you righteous little—" Samantha silenced her with a glare. "I'm not judging. I'm giving you both a choice. I can turn this over to the authorities, and you'll both face the legal consequences. Or you can sign an agreement ceding majority control of Elevate Edge to an independent board and stepping down from all executive positions." Jonathan's eyes flashed. "What? You want us to step aside? You can retain some shares, but you'll be figureheads at best," Samantha clarified. "Real leadership will be handled by people who won't break the law for profit. The company will survive, though drastically changed, and I keep the evidence. If either of you tries anything underhanded, I won't hesitate to release it." Veronica's face contorted in fury. "You can't do this. It's extortion." Samantha leaned in, voice lethal. "I can, and I will, if needed. You destroyed my family, humiliated me, and cast me out when I was pregnant. You threatened my chance at a future. Now, I'm simply returning the favor by ensuring neither of you can wield that kind of power again." A moment of strained silence followed. Jonathan exhaled shakily, burying his face in his hands. He knew the game was over. Veronica, on the other hand, looked ready to lunge at Samantha, eyes ablaze with hatred. But she also knew she was trapped. Finally, she sank into her chair, whispering profanities under her breath. Samantha pushed 2 copies of the agreement across the table. With trembling hands, Jonathan and Veronica signed away their controlling stakes. Samantha felt a wave of emotion wash over her triumph. Yes, but also sadness for what might have been. Before leaving, Samantha said, "You asked me once what I wanted. Here it is. I want a life free from your shadows. I want a world where Mia never has to face the betrayals I endured. And now I have it." She gathered the documents, leaving Jonathan and Veronica in stunned silence. Her revenge was complete, but more importantly, her liberation was sealed. No story resonates without transformation. Samantha, once cast aside in her most vulnerable moment, chose not to succumb to despair. She channeled her pain into a fiery determination, forging a future that defied the cruelty she'd endured. By returning to Parkhaven on her own terms, she toppled the very empire that had tried to break her, ensuring those responsible would never regain the power to destroy another life. It's a testament to how strength can arise from devastation and how the quietest voice can shatter the loudest deceit. If you found yourself holding your breath during Samantha's harrowing journey, imagine how many others might feel the same. Share this video, comment your thoughts on Samantha's choices, and subscribe to this channel so we can explore more stories that prove resilience is the most powerful form of revenge. Your support keeps these stories alive. Let's grow together.